My name is Khloe Sinclair, and I'm 28 years old. For 8 straight years, my parents threw my little sister a party on my birthday. The cake had her name on it, and mine wasn't even on the napkins. Gracie was the miracle child. I was the child who was already there. When I turned 18, I finally went off in front of my entire family, 40 people, while my mother stood there holding the cake knife. But here's what none of them knew. The birthdays were never the worst part. The worst part knocked on my door 10 years later, wearing my parents' faces, holding the apology I'd waited my whole life to hear. That apology came with a price tag, and the price was the truth about my sister. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where quiet people finally get to tell the loudest chapters of their lives. If you've ever been the one holding a family together while nobody noticed you were in the room, this story is for you. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from. And be sure to subscribe, because stories like mine don't end where you think they do. Mine starts with pink balloons. It ends in a small office with a box of tissues nobody touched. We lived in a 2-story house outside Dayton, Ohio, with a maple tree my dad never got around to trimming. Before I turned 10, I'd have told you my family was normal. My mom, Linda, ran a little flower shop and taught Sunday school. My dad, Tom, fixed furnaces and air conditioners and said maybe 10 sentences a day. I was the kid who colored inside the lines. But even the before years had a shape to them, and the shape was quiet. 3 times between my 6th birthday and my 9th, my mother went to the hospital with a rounding belly and came home with flat hands and a face like a locked door. Nobody explained it to me. Grown-ups in our town didn't explain things like that to children. My dad would just press my shoulder and say, "Be easy on your mom this week." So I was easy. I made my own lunches. I signed my own permission slips with her name because asking felt like noise. I learned that a good girl was a girl you could forget was in the house. I got so good at it that my 3rd grade teacher once marked me absent while I was sitting in the 2nd row. I laughed about it then. It takes me effort to laugh about it. Now, here's the thing about learning to disappear when you're small. You think it's a favor you're doing your family. You don't know yet that some favors get collected forever. For my 9th birthday, my mother made a lemon cake with my name in blue icing and my dad sang off key, and I remember thinking that was the whole world. It was the last birthday that belonged to me for a very long time, because in the middle of my 10th birthday party, my mother stood up from a lawn chair, grabbed the table, and everything about my family changed in one night. My 10th birthday was a backyard party. 6 kids from school, a folding table, my grandma June frosting cupcakes in the kitchen. My mom was 7 months pregnant, and this time nobody had let themselves say the word baby out loud. All spring I was mid-bite into a hot dog when she stood up with her hand pressed low, and I watched the paper plate slide off her lap in a way I still see sometimes when I close my eyes. Her water had broken 9 weeks early. My dad drove her out of there with the streamer still taped to the fence, and Grandma June herded 6 confused 4th graders through cake like a woman defusing a bomb. My sister was born that night by emergency C-section. 31 weeks, 32 pounds, small enough to fit in my dad's 2 hands. They named her Gracie. Late that evening at June's kitchen table, my grandmother lit a candle on a leftover cupcake and told me to make a wish anyway. I remember exactly what I wished, because I was 10 and terrified. And I'd heard the phone calls. I wished for my sister to live. Blow out the candle. Seal the deal. Careful what you wish for on birthday candles. Mine came true all the way, and I have never once regretted the wish itself. I want that on the record before I tell you the rest. My sister lived. The doctors called her a fighter. The nurses called her a little miracle. And my mother stood over that incubator and took those words the way a drowning woman takes a rope. 3 losses, 3 hospital bracelets that never got worn, and now a heartbeat in a plastic box. Arriving on the exact date her living daughter had arrived 10 years before. My mother decided that meant something. Maybe anybody would have. But what she decided it meant, that would cost me every birthday I had left in that house. And it would cost Gracie a whole lot more. Gracie spent 6 weeks in the NICU in Dayton. And my parents basically moved into that hospital. I moved into Grandma June's spare room, the one that smelled like mothballs and lavender. I was 10 years old and I ran my own life like a tiny accountant. Packed my lunches, laid out my clothes, called June's landline, my emergency contact. Tuesdays and Sundays, my parents would bring me to the hospital, and I'd wash my hands to the elbow and look at my sister through the plastic. She was the size of a loaf of bread, wires everywhere. I loved her before she ever saw my face. And I need you to hold on to that because this story is not about me hating a baby. It's about what got built around one. One Sunday, a nurse looked at me sitting in the corner with my homework spread on 2 chairs, and she said to my mother, "She's such an easy kid. You'd forget she was here." My mother smiled. It was the first time I'd seen her smile in weeks, and I did the math a 10-year-old does without knowing she's doing it. Being invisible made Mom smile. Needing things made her tired. So, I would be the easiest child in the state of Ohio, and that would be my gift to everybody. If I could reach back through 18 years and take one sentence out of the air, it might be that nurses, not the doctor's speeches, not the church announcements that came later, just that one kind poisonous compliment. In February, they brought Gracie home in a car seat she barely dented under a blanket. June had crocheted, and our whole street came out on their porches to watch. I stood in the driveway holding the door. That was my job at the homecoming, and I did it well. The miracle came home, and the shrine went up faster than the storm windows. You have to understand what a small Ohio town does with a miracle. Our church put Gracie on the praise board right up top in cut-out construction paper letters. "God's little miracle," it said with her hospital photo. Casseroles arrived for months, like my parents had done something, have survived something. Women from the congregation would stop my mother at the grocery store and touch her arm and get teary. And my mother would tell the story again. The 3 losses, the broken water at the birthday party, the 3.5-pound fighter. She got very good at telling it. I noticed even at 10 that I appeared in the story only as a date on a calendar. The party. The miracle interrupted. Around Easter, my mother had Gracie's Niku bracelet framed, white matting, little brass plaque, the whole thing. She hung it in the living room over the couch, in the spot where my 4th grade school picture used to be. The picture went on top of the piano, she said, just temporarily until she found a better frame. I want to be fair to my mother, so I'll say this plainly. I don't think she ever once decided to love me less. I think she found a religion that let her stop drowning, and I wasn't part of the liturgy. But here's the fact: I stopped being able to argue with the fact that sat on our living room wall for the next 8 years, where anyone could check it. A better frame never came. My school picture stayed on the piano until the piano got moved, and then it stayed in a drawer. The bracelet stayed on the wall. In our house, you could hang proof of almost losing a child. Proof of having one, the regular kind, the kind that ate her vegetables and made no trouble. That went in a drawer. The June I turned 11, I asked for a lemon cake and 3 friends from school. Small ask. I'd learned to keep my ask small. The morning of my birthday, I came downstairs and the backyard was already full of pink. Pink balloons on the fence, pink streamers on my dad's untrimmed maple, and across the patio, a banner with 6 letters on it, Gracie. Her first birthday. Our birthday, technically. But nobody was using that word. By noon, there were 30 people in our yard, most of them from church, cooping over a baby in a tulle dress who would not remember any of it. There was a cake shaped like the number 1. There was a slideshow of NICU photos set to piano music. My 3 friends showed up, stood around awkwardly holding gifts with my name on them, and got absorbed into an audience for someone else's resurrection story. My cake, and my mother did make me one, I want to be accurate, was a sheet of grocery store vanilla, served after the slideshow from the end of the table. Somebody's aunt asked whose birthday it was, too. That's the sentence I remember, too. That night, I found my mother in the kitchen, and I asked her in the flat voice kids use when they're trying to sound grown, why Gracie's party got to be on my day. My mother looked at me with genuine surprise, like the question itself was a small betrayal, and she said the sentence that would run our family for the next decade. "You've had 10 birthdays already, Khloe." She almost never got one. Then she kissed the top of my head and went to bed. I stood in the kitchen doing arithmetic with the only heart I had. 10 birthdays was my share. I'd used mine up, I was 11 years old and I genuinely believed I owed a debt, and the currency was days with my name on them. You might be wondering where my father was in all this. Physically about 6 feet from the grill. That's where he lived at every party. Tongs in hand, face arranged into pleasant fog. My dad was not a cruel man. He was something that costs a family almost as much. A man who saw everything and had done the math on what noticing would cost him. Over the next couple of years, the birthday developed rules the way rivers develop banks, slow and then permanent. Gracie opened presents first because she cried if she didn't. Gracie picked the theme, princesses or ponies, because it was easier. Gracie blew out my candles with me, hands cupped around the flame to help her get used to it. And by the time she was 3, she just blew them out herself while the room laughed and clapped. And me, I got assigned to her. Watch your sister by the cake table. Take your sister to the bathroom. Walk your sister around the yard when she screams. I became staff at my own birthday. Unpaid. And honestly, the tips were terrible. Once when I was 12, my dad found me in the garage after everyone left and gave me a wrapped box. Quiet like contraband, a model horse I'd wanted. He said, "Happy birthday, kiddo. Don't tell your mother." It had hurt her feelings. I said thank you. I meant it, too. Which is the part that stings now. I spent years grading that man on a curve because he felt bad quietly. But a gift you have to hide isn't a gift, it's a settlement. Only one person in that family refused to settle. She was 5'2", pushing 65. She smelled like lavender and cigarettes. She claimed she'd quit. And she owned a camera that was about to become the most important object of my childhood. Grandma June was my dad's mother. And whatever Jean made him quiet had skipped a generation on its way to him. At my 11th birthday, Gracie's coronation, the pink one, June had watched the whole day from a folding chair, with her arms crossed like a building inspector. Late that night, before she drove home, she called me out onto the front porch. She had an old Polaroid camera, the kind that spits the picture out wet. "Sit on the step," she said. I sat, flash. She waved the photo dry, looked at it, and nodded like it had passed inspection. "Somebody ought to have proof you turned 11, she said. She did it again the next year and the year after. Same porch, same step, same flash. At Snort's home, she kept the photos in a shoebox with a strip of masking tape across the lid. And on the tape, in her slanted handwriting, a label, proof of Khloe. I didn't know until later that she also went to war for me every single year in the driveway, in that low voice adults think kids can't hear. The June I turned 12, I heard a piece of it through the screen door. My grandmother saying, "One afternoon, Linda, that's all I'm asking. One afternoon for the other one." And my mother answering, "Wounded righteous. You of all people know what that baby survived. A car door. Gravel." I didn't hear the rest, and for years I wondered what my grandmother knew about my mother that kept the fight going that long and that quiet. Grandma Jun saw me. She had a shoebox of proof. But one witness can't stop a religion. And in our house my sister was becoming one. The years blur a little here, the way sanded wood blurs. So, I'll give you the highlights of birthdays 12 and 13. 12 was the year my cake became cupcakes, because Gracie's cake was a 2-tier castle, and the bakery order got complicated, and cupcakes were easier, and Khloe doesn't mind. Khloe never minded. Minding was for people whose day it was. 13 was the year the relatives card started coming addressed to just Gracie, because that's what the family grapevine had absorbed. June 14th was Gracie's day. My Aunt Patty in Indiana sent me a separate card that year, a week late, with $20 and a note that said, "Sorry, sweetheart. I got my dates confused." She hadn't. The dates were the same date. That was the whole problem. And nobody in Indiana or Kentucky could see it from where they stood, because they only ever heard the story my mother told. 13 was also the year I stopped inviting friends, since watching them watch my family required more explaining than a 13-year-old has words for, and it was the year I started counting something. Now I've never told anyone this, so be kind to the kid I was. I would keep a number in my head all day on my birthday. A running tally of how many times either of my parents said my name out loud. Not happy birthday, just my name. Khloe. The year I turned 13, the number at midnight was 0. The year I turned 14, I quit keeping the tally. And I'd love to tell you, I quit out of self-respect. The truth is, I quit because of what happened with a pizza box. And after that night, counting felt like scratching at a door I finally understood was painted on. While I was learning to disappear, my sister was learning something too. And I want to be careful here because she was 4 and 4-year-olds are not villains. The spring she was 4, I took second place at the middle school science fair. A model of the water cycle, cotton ball clouds, a little pump I'd saved for. I brought it home and set it on the dining table, ribbon and all, and for one dinner, my parents looked at something I'd made. Gracie watched them do it from her booster seat. The next morning, the clouds were torn off. The tubing was snapped, and the ribbon was in the trash under the coffee grounds. She didn't even hide it well. She was 4. When my mother found me holding the wreckage, she winced, and then she said the spell. "She's been through so much, honey." Which was a strange thing to say about a healthy 4-year-old with 200 stuffed animals, and also the only prayer our family knew. That same year, Gracie bit her preschool teacher hard enough to leave a mark, because circle time had ended before her turn to talk. The school suggested gently a behavioral evaluation. Our pediatrician suggested it too. "There are wonderful child psychologists in Dayton," was the phrasing that made it home. My mother switched pediatricians. She told the church ladies the old doctor didn't understand Prius. And I heard her on the phone with Aunt Patty doing the voice she used for settling things. "There is nothing wrong with that child," she said. "Mom didn't want a diagnosis. A diagnosis meant the miracle had a flaw, so the flaw got a tutor, and later the flaw got a checkbook, and the bill just kept riding down the years toward all of us." For my 14th birthday, I asked for one thing, and I engineered it like a heist. Not a party, a dinner. Romano's pizza on a Tuesday. The 4 of us. 1 hour, no balloons. I picked pizza because Gracie liked pizza, so there'd be nothing to melt down over. I asked my dad instead of my mom on purpose in the garage. "Manto man over the lawnmower," he said. "You got it, kiddo." He looked me in the eye. Morning of my mother remembered a spring recital rehearsal for Gracie's dance class. The recital itself was weeks out. This was a rehearsal for 4-year-olds. And the schedule did what our schedules always did, folded one direction. My dad came to my room where I was sitting in the good shirt I'd ironed. "We'll grab the pizza to go," he said. "You can eat it on the way to watch your sister." I rode to a dance studio on my 14th birthday with a to-go box on my knees. Then I sat in the car in the parking lot by my own choice, because there are limits, and I ate 2 slices while the sun went down. When we got home, my dad, feeling the size of it, stuck a birthday candle in a cold slice at the kitchen counter. It leaned sideways in the congealed cheese. He lit it and looked at me, hopeful, like an apology was a thing you could do with a lighter. I blew it out to be polite, and I finished growing up somewhere in that exhale. My dad wasn't silent because he disagreed quietly. He was silent because silence was cheaper, and I was the account it got billed to. Fine. Every teenager learns her parents are human. The next year I did something about it, and it worked about as well as you'd guess. Freshman year there was a counselor at my high school named Miss Alvarez. The kind of adult kids actually talk to. In October I talked. I kept it factual. No crying like a witness. The birthdays, the framed bracelet over the couch, the tally that hit 0. She listened with her chin on her hand, and she believed me, and she did her job. She called my parents in. I know now what that meeting looked like, because I've been the professional in the room for versions of it. My mother arrived with a potted mom from her own shop, and the NICU story, and she cried at the right places. And she said, "Teenage girls and their moms, you know how it gets." And she was warm and reasonable and devastated in a completely calibrated way. My file got a note about adjustment and sensitivity. The school moved on. No bruises. Fed. Honor roll. Next kid in line. And I don't even fully blame them. Miss Alvarez caught me in the hall afterward. And to her lasting credit, she didn't pretend. She just said quietly, "Keep your grades up, Khloe. Doors open at 18 that nobody can close on you." Then she walked off to her next fire. That sentence became load-bearing. I want to pause here because I know some of you have lived this exact minute. If you've ever tried to tell the truth about your family and watched a grown-up choose the prettier story, tell me in the comments. I read every one of them. It took me years to learn I wasn't crazy. Maybe your comments saved somebody those years. And if you're new here, subscribe, because what happened at my 18th birthday is still ahead. And I promise you, nobody in that backyard has forgotten it. The spring I turned 15, I went hunting for my birth certificate, because Ohio lets you work at 15 with a permit. And I wanted a job the way other kids wanted cars. The certificate lived somewhere in the storage room, off the laundry in the filing box. I went in on a Saturday when the house sounded empty. It wasn't. My mother was sitting on the floor of the storage room with her back against the shelf, no lights on, and it took my eyes a second to understand what was in her lap. A shoebox. My family kept its whole souls in shoeboxes, apparently. And inside it, 3 hospital bracelets, newborn-sized, never worn. Each one had writing on it, and I was close enough to see that they weren't labeled Baby Sinclair. They had names, first names, middle names started and crossed out like she'd kept revising. 3 names I had never heard one time in my entire life. For 3 children, nobody had ever told me to mourn. My mother didn't hear me. She was running her thumb around the curve of one bracelet, over and over, the way you rub a worry stone, and her face wasn't crying. It was doing something worse than crying. It was nothing at all. I backed out of that doorway on my socks, and stood in the laundry room with my pulse in my ears, 15 years old, holding a truth way too heavy for the age I was. My mother wasn't celebrating Gracie. She was apologizing to 3 babies who never came home, and Gracie was just the altar she could reach. Understanding that didn't fix one single thing about my life, but it rearranged the furniture in me. You can't purely hate a drowning woman. You also can't keep letting her stand on your shoulders. My 15th birthday happened at Grandma June's, which by then was tradition. The real one, the porch one. Dinner at my parents' with a store cake after Gracie's celebration wound down. Then June would take me home with her, and we'd do the step, the flash, the wave, it dry. 5 photos in the box now. 5 clothes getting taller against the same railing. That year, June didn't put the lid back on right away. She sat down next to me on the porch swing, with the box open on her knees, and went through them one by one, like a bank teller counting. Then she said the thing I have carried ever since, flat and level as a carpenter's tool. A miracle shouldn't cost a child. I started to say something loyal, some reflex about Mom trying her best, and June just looked at me over her glasses until it died off. I fought your mother every year of your life, she said. I lost every year, so we're done trying to fix them, and we're going to build you a door instead. That was the whole speech. Then she drove me to the diner on Route 40, where her friend Darlene ran the counter, and I filled out a work permit application with June's pen. Weekend shifts to start. A savings account with just my name on it. Opened that Monday. Statements mailed to June's address. My idea. And she approved it like a co-conspirator. No questions, every tip went in. On the inside of the shoebox lid, June wrote a date in pencil, small, where the tape wouldn't cover it. My 18th birthday. We weren't planning a party. We were planning an exit 3 years out. I'd love to tell you the plan held to schedule. It mostly did. What it couldn't do was protect my face at 16 or my future at 17, and I'll take those in order. 16 was supposed to be the license. I'd done driver's ed with diner money. I'd booked the road test for my birthday morning. Classic American, right? And both my parents said they'd come. Neither did a casting call for a local furniture, wanted cute kids. And Gracie was 6 and photogenic, and somebody had to take her, and somebody turned out to mean both of them. June took me. I passed first try. Parallel 16 was supposed to be the license. I'd done driver's ed with diner money. I'd booked the road test for my birthday. Morning classic American right, and both my parents said they'd come. Neither did a casting call for a local furniture commercial. Wanted cute kids, and Gracie was 6 and photogenic, and somebody had to take her, and somebody turned out to mean both of them. June took me. I passed. First try, parallel parked like I'd been born in reverse. The examiner actually said, "Smooth's 16th birthday I've had in this seat all year. Hold that little victory in your mind, because here's the evening." Store cake at the kitchen table. Gracie, fresh off her audition, and vibrating from an afternoon of strangers clapping. June put 1 cupcake in front of me, 1 candle, and said, "This one's just a boundary the size of a cupcake." Gracie reached for the candle. June moved it calm as a crossing guard and said, "Not this one, sweetheart." And my sister, 6 years old, remember, assembled by every adult in her orbit, grabbed her plastic fork and ratted across my cheek. Tyne snapped, screaming so loud the neighbor's dog started up. There was blood, mine to be clear. And in the scramble that followed, my mother swept Gracie up, pressed that shrieking child to her chest, turned to me holding my own face, and said, "What did you do to her?" "I have a faint scar by my left eye. You'd have to know to look for it. Relatives were told I fell." I heard my mother say it on the phone that week, easy as reading a recipe. That night, I understood the house rule. Nobody would ever say out loud. Gracie's feelings outranked my skin. $60 went into the account that weekend. The door fund was ahead of schedule. By 7, Gracie had gotten too big for the world to absorb her the way our living room did. Second grade recess. A girl named Addison wouldn't surrender the swing, so Gracie planted both hands and shoved her off the top of the arc. Addison's wrist broke in 2 places. The school demanded a behavioral evaluation, this time in writing, and for a week I thought the outside world had finally outsteadied my mother. I underestimated her. She pulled Gracie to half days, hired a private tutor from 2 towns over, and told the congregation that public school couldn't handle a spirited child. Spirited. My dad wrote the tutor's checks and the Addison family's urgent care bill and said nothing at any volume. And the praise board at church quietly got a new family's miracle up top, because even a congregation has a shelf life for one story, though. Nobody said that out loud either around. Then I caught something I've never been able to delete passing the bathroom, door cracked. I saw Gracie standing on the step stool at the mirror, 7 years old, getting her face right, chin down, eyes big. And I heard her practice it. I've been through so much twice adjusting her voice, in between like scales on a piano. She'd taken my mother's prayer and turned it into a tool, the way kids turn everything you hand them into a tool, and nobody had ever handed her anything else. Everyone kept asking what was wrong with Gracie. Nobody asked what we were building her out of. I was 17 before the answer started scaring me more than it hurt me. And by then, my parents had made their plans for my life, too. They announced them over meatloaf, like a weather report. My 17th birthday dinner was meatloaf, because Gracie had decided she hated pizza that month, and it was at our own kitchen table, because the big celebration hers had happened in the yard on Saturday. Miss Alvarez had spent that fall quietly feeding me nursing program brochures since my grades were good, and hospitals don't scare people who grew up in one. I'd made the mistake of leaving a Columbus brochure on the counter. My mother had found it, and she'd had time to prepare remarks. "Khloe," she said, passing the greens, "we think community college here in town makes the most sense. You can live at home, save money, and be around to help with Gracie. Fing to activities, watching her when the tutor's off. Family pitches in. That's what family is." Then she smiled at me, warm as anything, and said, "You're so good with her." My dad studied his meatloaf like there'd be a test on it. And I had one long, quiet moment where the whole rest of my life stood in the kitchen doorway wearing an apron. 25, and driving Gracie to auditions 30, and covering shifts at the shop, the permanent staff of the Miracle Room and board included. I looked at my mother and I said, "We'll see." In exactly the voice she'd taught me, pleasant, easy, invisible. Then I went to my room, and by midnight, with my own debit card and June's mailing address, I had application fees paid at 3 schools in Columbus. Nursing all 3. The girl they never saw had learned one skill better than anybody in that house, and I finally aimed it. It's very easy to move quietly when nobody's ever watching you. 11 months to the date on the shoebox lid. Then my mother hung a banner. Here's how my 18th birthday ended up with an audience of 40. Grandma June turned 70 that same week of June. And for once, the whole scattered family aimed itself at Dayton at the same time. Aunt Patty drove down from Indiana with my cousins. My Uncle Mark, my mother's brother, came up from Kentucky with his wife. Add the church regulars, the neighbors, Darlene from the diner, and you had the biggest gathering our backyard had ever attempted. June had negotiated the terms herself, and I heard her lay them down in our kitchen with the voice she used on delivery men. One party, Linda. One afternoon, both birthdays, both girls' names, and I mean it. My mother said, "Of course, June. Honestly, like she was the injured party and I did something I'd trained myself out of for years. I hope just an inch. 18 felt too big to erase. Legal adult cap and gown 2 weeks earlier. The acceptance letter from Columbus already hidden at June's house like contraband. Even our family, I figured, couldn't sing over that. The Friday before, cars started arriving. Patty's minivan, Mark's truck. I was upstairs when I heard the ladder clatter against the patio, and I looked down from my bedroom window and watched my parents hang the banner across the yard. The two of them working together, tongue out careful the way other people's parents hang Christmas lights, custom-printed vinyl, gold letters on cream. It said celebrating our miracle, one name under it, 10 years of practice, and they still spelled the guest of honor, Gracie. I stood at that window and felt the hope fold itself up small neat like it already knew. Then I went and taped the shoebox shut for moving day. It was going with me either way. Saturday came in hot and cold, real June weather, and by 2 in the afternoon, our backyard held more family than I had ever seen in one place. Snorts Patty and her boys, Mark and his wife Rhonda, cousins I knew from Christmas cards, Darlene, who'd given me the day off, and a hug that meant something. And June, 70 years old that week, holding court by the roses with the Polaroid camera on a strap around her neck. Because tradition was tradition, porch or no porch. For a minute, with the burgers going and the coolers sweating, it almost passed for what the neighbors probably thought it was. Then you started reading the details, the way you read a room you grew up in. The cake on the main table was 2 tiers, bakery made, and it said, "Happy birthday, Gracie," in piped rosettes. There was no second cake. On the gift table sat a mountain wrapped in pink foil and off at the edge one white envelope with my name in my mother's handwriting. I knew what was in it, $50. And a card with a cardinal on it, because the drugstore was out of anything else probably. Aunt Patty stood at that table a long moment, did a lap of the yard and came back to my mother with her voice pitched low, but not low enough. "Linda, where's Khloe's cake? It's her 18th, and my mother, sliding deviled eggs onto a platter, answered without even looking up in the tone you'd use to explain a parking rule. "Oh, Chloe's an adult now. She doesn't need all the fuss." I watched Patty's face do something slow. I watched Mark's wife glance at Mark. 40 people. And for the first time in a decade, some of them had started doing math. Meanwhile, June headed upstairs for more film, patting my arm on the way. That camera never made it back to the shoebox. Late afternoon. My dad dinged his ring against a beer bottle, which in Tom Sinclair terms was a press conference. He put his arm around my mother and announced the exciting news they were remodeling this summer. Gracie here, he paused so people could smile at her, was finally getting her big girl princess room, the one with the window seat. They were giving her room, he said, since leaving us anyway. That's how I found out my departure had been absorbed into the household story. Not fought, not mourned, just repurposed. A vacancy flipped before the tenant was out. A couple of people clapped, uncertain. Patty did not clap. And Gracie, 8 years old, sugar-loaded, deep in the longest afternoon of shared attention in her life, heard the applause land on something that wasn't her, and went looking for the reason. The reason was June kneeling in front of me by the roses with the Polaroid raised saying, 18, sweet pea, smile like you've got somewhere to be. My sister crossed that yard like weather. "Me first," she said. "Do me first." June, steady as ever, said what she always said. "In a minute, sweetheart. This one's Chloe's turn." And Gracie grabbed the camera, grabbed it by the strap while it hung on a 70-year-old woman's neck and yanked twice hard. June's glasses skewed. Her knee hit the patio bricks until the strap gave, and my sister raised the camera over her head with both hands and threw it down on the concrete. It came apart the way old cameras do, in pieces with names, door, hinge, the half-developed photo of me flapping out white and ruined. Silence, one full breath of it, 40 people staring. Then my mother scooped Gracie up, Shing already narrating. She's overwhelmed. It's been such a big day for her. And my father went and got the broom. Nobody looked at June on her knees. Nobody looked at me. Something in me, the part that had spent 8 years folding itself smaller, finally tore along the crease. I didn't scream first. I want that noted because everyone remembers the screaming, and nobody remembers the walk. I helped June into a chair. Then I went up to my room, took the taped shoebox out of my duffel, came back down through the kitchen, and set it on the gift table next to the pink foil mountain. My hands were shaking, but not my voice. Not yet. I have something to show everybody, I said and pulled the tape. I laid Grandma Jun's Polaroids out in a row like a hand of cards. 8 of them, 7 porch birthdays, and the one June had snapped that morning through the kitchen window. Me at the sink, not knowing. This is me turning 11, I said. My grandmother took it on her porch at 9 at night because at the party that day, that banner, said Gracie. This is 12. Cupcakes because my cake got complicated. 13. That's the year the card stopped coming with my name. 14. I don't have a party picture, so here's the porch again. My birthday dinner that year was 2 slices of pizza, in a parking lot outside a dance studio. 15, 16, look close at 16. There's a mark by my eye. You were all told I fell. I got that taking a fork for a cupcake. My voice was climbing now. 10 years of even killed coming apart in front of the deviled eggs, and I turned to my parents and pointed at the living room window. There's a bracelet framed on that wall, I said, where my school picture used to hang. Ask them when the picture went back up. Ask them what's on this banner. Ask them whose birthday is on the cake at my 18th birthday party. My mother stepped forward white-faced and reached for the old rope. Khloe, honey, you've had so many birthdays. And she almost never. And I finally said it loud enough for the fence line. 8 years of it in one short sentence. I existed the whole time. The yard went so still I could hear the grill ticking. You didn't lose 3 babies and get a miracle. I said quieter, which was somehow louder. You lost 3 babies and threw away the kid you had. And I almost never got a mother. We don't put that on a cake, nobody moved. Then Gracie's voice came up from somewhere near the presence, honestly bewildered, asking, why is everyone looking at her? And 40 people heard the machine say the quiet part with its own mouth. I picked up my photos. I left the envelope. Give it to the guest of honor, I said, and walked into the house to pack. I packed the duffel I'd packed in my head 100 times. Aunt Patty came up while I was zipping it and didn't try any of the "it's all a misunderstanding" speech. She wrote her cell number on the back of a gas receipt like it was contraband and folded it into my hand. You call me kiddo, she said. Down in the yard, I could see Mark standing with my dad by the grill, not talking in that way men have where the not talking is the conversation. Church folks were leaving early in clumps, doing arithmetic of their own on the drive home. June waited in her Buick with the engine running. The only blockade was at the front door, and it was my mother, arms crossed, mascara gone to weather. And here is the part that tells you everything about the house I grew up in. She stood between me and the exit on my 18th birthday after all of it, and the sentence she chose was, "You're really doing this to Gracie?" To Gracie. I looked at my mother for a long second, and I stepped around her careful the way you step around wet paint. I slept that night in June's spare room. Lavender and mothballs, freest air I'd ever breathed. 6 days later, I was on a bus to Columbus with a duffel, a shoebox, and a savings account. It had taken me 3 years to build. Before the end of that summer, my old bedroom was pink. Quick pause, because I know some of you are packing a bag in your head right now. If you've ever walked out of a house where you were invisible, put the word out in the comments. You'll be surprised how many of us there are. And stay with me, because 10 years later, my parents knocked on my door, and what they wanted made the birthdays look like a warm-up. I'll give you the decade fast, because I lived it slow, and that was the point of it. Columbus, a shared apartment with a girl named Maya Torres, who worked the same diner chain and became the sister I got to pick. Community college while waitressing, then the nursing program, then boards. By 22, I was an RN. These days, I work pediatrics at a children's hospital. And yes, I've done the math on that out loud in therapy. I spend my shifts making sure sick kids get seen, and making sure the healthy siblings in the corner get a popsicle and a question about their day. Funny how we pick our jobs. Birthdays got rebuilt from studs. Every June 14th, Maya bakes a lemon cake from Grandma June's recipe card, and my name goes on it in blue icing spelled correctly. Every letter mine. The first year she did it, I had to leave the kitchen for a minute. Contact with my parents thinned to Christmas cards. One line in my mother's fluorescent cursive, hoping I was well. June visited on the bus spree and unstoppable until Patty's boys started driving her and the family. The family had shifted on its foundation. After that party, called my mother maybe twice a year now, birthdays and Christmas out of duty. Mark stopped coming up from Kentucky. Altogether, the church crowd drifted, the casseroles found newer tragedies, and the praise board changed families. The shrine was losing its congregation, but the thing we'd built on that altar was turning into a teenager, and it was discovering that the world outside our backyard does not clap on command. The world grades harder than that, and my sister had never once been handed a pencil. The reports came through June and Patty in pieces over years, and they read like a storm, getting an upgrade every season. 8th grade kicked off the cheer squad for slapping a girl who got the top of the pyramid. My parents' response was a new travel team 2 towns over. Freshman year, the windshield of a driving instructor's car cracked with a water bottle thrown from inside after a failed parking maneuver and a correction she didn't like. My dad's checkbook handled it. The checks got bigger as she did. That was the whole parenting strategy. Now, a price list for other people's patience. Every school shuffle came with my mother's same explanation, worn smooth as a riverstone. Teachers these days, that child has been through so much. Somewhere in there my dad started sleeping in the den. June told me that flatly over pie, the way you report a crack in a foundation. 26 years of marriage held together by a story neither of them could afford to stop telling, and the story was eating the house. I listened to all of it from 70 meters away with my stomach in a knot I recognized from childhood. You can leave the factory. The factory keeps running. Its best product was 15 now, 5'6", beautiful and absolutely certain the world owed her applause. It had mysteriously stopped paying. Then one Tuesday in October, my phone rang twice in 1 hour. The first call was Grandma June. The second was a number I'd deleted 10 years before. Gracie had put a girl in the hospital. Here's what happened. Assembled from June, from Patty, and eventually from paperwork. Sophomore year, varsity volleyball, and a junior named Kayla got voted team captain, a vote Gracie had assumed was a formality on her way to the title. After practice in the locker room, my sister slammed Kayla's head into the edge of a locker. Kayla's cheekbone broke. There was a hallway camera outside the locker room that caught the before and the after, the walking in calm and the walking out calm. And that calm was what turned it from a schoolyard scuffle into something with a case number. Snorts, 15 years old, charged in juvenile court with felonious assault. Kayla's family, to their credit, told the prosecutor they didn't want a child buried. They wanted a child stopped. So, the court did the thing courts do when a kid's file is somehow both thick and empty. Before deciding what happened next, probation at home or a residential treatment program upstate, Snorts the judge ordered a full psychological evaluation and a social history, which meant a court-appointed evaluator. A psychologist named Dr. Hicks would be interviewing everyone who knew the family, parents, grandmother, and the adult sister, who'd lived in that house for 18 years. For a solid decade, my parents had outrun every evaluation ever suggested. Pediatricians, preschools, principals, all waved off, paid off, or prayed off. Now one was coming with a judge behind it, and there was no doctor to switch. I got the letter with the appointment window and sat at my kitchen table, looking at it for a long time. There was exactly one person alive who had watched the whole assembly line start to finish from inside the room. Me. My parents knew that too, which is why that Saturday they drove 70 meters north. They showed up at my apartment door on a Saturday morning without calling first, and my first stupid thought was how small they'd gotten. My dad's hair had gone the color of dishwater ice. My mother was holding a bakery box like a passport. I let them in because 28 years of wiring doesn't rip out clean, and we sat around my little table, and my mother looked at the framed photo on my bookshelf. Me and Maya and June at my pinning ceremony for a beat too long. Then she said it. Khloe, we failed you. I've gone over it, and I failed you. I see it now. I want you to understand what those words did to me. I'd stopped waiting for them out loud years ago. But there's a room in you that never stops waiting. And the door of that room swung open so fast it banged the wall. My eyes went hot. I reached for her hand, and that's when my father cleared his throat and set the price on the table. "The evaluator's going to call you," he said, "this Hendricks woman. And honey, what you say is going to decide whether they send Gracie away to some facility. If you could just, keep the birthdays out of it. Tell her we're a normal family that hit a rough patch. Residential would destroy your sister." My mother squeezed my hand right on cue and added softly, "Do this and we can finally be a family again." Then when I said nothing, she reached for the oldest rope on the boat. "She's been through so much, Khloe. And you've always been so strong." There it was. The apology I'd waited my whole life for, and all I had to do to keep it was disappear one more time. I told my parents I needed time, which was true. And what I did with the time was drive to the juvenile detention center, where Gracie was being held pending disposition, because I wasn't going to decide anything about my sister from 70 meters up. It was the first time in our lives the two of us had ever sat alone in a room, 15 years old, in a sweatshirt with no strings. She was beautiful the way my mother is beautiful, and she looked at me like I was a vending machine that might still have something in it. "Nobody visits." She opened with cataloging her grievances: the food, the counselor who had it out for her, Kayla who provoked her, the vote that was rigged. I kept waiting for the part where a girl was in a hospital with a broken face. It never came. It genuinely was not on her list. "They'll fix it," she said, shrugging when I asked if she was scared. "They always fix it. Dad knows people." And I sat there hearing the factory in her voice. Every gear my parents ever installed turning right on schedule. But then, right at the end, with visiting time dying, my sister picked at the table edge and asked me something with no angle in it at all. The metal went out of her voice, and what was left was 8 years old. Why did everyone stop coming to my birthdays? She didn't know. Nobody had ever told her why the world kept cooling around her. Because answering would have meant admitting somebody built the weather. I drove home with my hands tight on the wheel, understanding the thing I'd have to say out loud soon. Lying to Dr. Hicks wouldn't save Gracie. It would just repaint the room she was already locked in. The question was what I loved more, the people in that house or being wanted by them. I took the question to the only courtroom I've ever fully trusted, which is Grandma June's kitchen table. She was 77 that year and moving slower, but the eyes still worked like a building inspector's. I laid it all out: the apology, the price tag, the girl in the sweatshirt with no strings. The shoebox sat on the table between us, because I'd brought it the way some people bring rosaries. June listened all the way to the end, without once telling me what to do. Grandmothers who love you don't hand you the answer, they hand you the right question. When I finished, she poured more coffee and asked hers. "When you were 11, she said, sitting on my porch step, at 9 at night. What did you need some adult to do?" The kitchen got very quiet. "Tell the truth," I said out loud to someone who could do something. June nodded slow and turned her coffee cup a half circle. "Well," she said, "now you're the adult." And then she said the same sentence she'd said on the porch swing 10 years before. Except this time she aimed them somewhere new. "A miracle shouldn't cost a child. That was true about you." She looked at me over her glasses. "It's true about her, too." I sat with that until it finished landing. The truth wasn't a weapon I'd be using against my sister. It was the first door anyone had ever tried to cut into the room she was sealed inside. I called Dr. Hicks's office that afternoon and confirmed for Thursday. I drove to Dayton, believing my parents thought I was coming to save the family story. I was coming to end it. Dr. Hicks's office was a plain room in a converted house near the courthouse. Bookshelf, clock, a box of tissues nobody touched. My parents were in the waiting room when I walked through. My mother stood, smoothed my collar, with 2 hands like she used to before church, and whispered, "We'll all be okay, sweetheart." She believed I'd read the script. I sat down across from a calm woman with a legal pad who asked me to describe in my own words the household my sister grew up in, and I chose. I want to be honest about what the choosing felt like, because it did not feel like triumph. It felt like unlocking my own jaw after 10 years. I told the whole thing flat and factual, the way I give reported shift change. The 3 losses nobody was allowed to grieve out loud, because that's the soil, all of it grew in the banner. 8 birthdays catalogued, including the fork and the scar, And the phrase "you were all told I fell." The pediatrician switched, the evaluations dodged, the tutors hired, the checks written, every consequence bought off the shelf before it could reach my sister's hands. The sentence Gracie rehearsed in a mirror at 7, and the question she asked me in a locked building at 15. I did not make her a monster because she isn't one. My sister isn't broken. I told her she was assembled. Every adult she ever met either worshipped her or invoiced her, and if this court sends her home to the factory, you will meet her again at 18 in adult court. And that file won't close. Then I said the part I'd driven 70 miles chewing on. My recommendation for whatever an arranged sister's word is worth. Residential treatment, the full program and family counseling ordered for my parents. Mandatory because all 4 of us are the case. You treat the patient, not the symptom. Chris wrote for a long time. When I came out, my mother read my face before I said a word, the way she'd always been able to when she bothered to look. "What did you tell her?" she said. And I said the truth, all of it. And I watched the apology leave her eyes like water finding a drain. "You've destroyed this family," she said. Not loud, which made it worse. And a lifetime of church discipline kept her voice from breaking as she said it. Maybe once that sentence would have folded me in half. I picked up my coat. "No, Mom," I said. "I finally stopped helping you hide the wreck. I existed the whole time, and this time it's on the record." 6 weeks later, the court ordered 9 months of residential treatment upstate, probation after that until she turns 18, and family counseling as a condition of reunification. For the first time in her life, my sister was going to be looked at professionally, by people whose approval could not be purchased. The counseling did what light does to houses kept dark. 2 months in, my dad moved into an apartment by the fairgrounds. It turns out the silence that holds marriage together can't survive a room where the whole job is saying things out loud. He wrote me a letter a few months later, the longest string of words I've ever gotten from the man, and it included one line I keep in the shoebox now. I told myself staying quiet kept the peace, but it just kept the bill on your side of the table. The relatives, who'd been coming to a slow boil since the banner party, went ahead and boiled. Patty said her piece to my mother, and what she said to me on the phone was simpler. "We're not mad that you went off, honey. We're mad it took us that long to see what you were going off about." And my parents apologized for real this time, separately with nothing in either hand. Dad's was the letter Mom's took until spring on June's porch of all places. No bakery box, no script. "You were right," she said, looking at the railing where 8 birthday photos got taken. "I couldn't look at it, so I made you carry it." "I'm so sorry, Khloe." I believed her. Believing her and trusting her are 2 different renovations, and only one of them was done. So, I didn't say I forgive you because I'm still not sure I do. And I've stopped saying things early, just to keep other people comfortable. I said, "Here's what I can offer. Coffee once a month, the 2 of us. You don't get to retell my childhood back to me in a nicer version, and we see how it goes from there." She flinched, and then she nodded, and we've kept it up ever since. Month after month, some of those coffees were terrible. 2 were almost easy. That's the honest math of it. "I believe you're sorry," I told her at the first one, "but sorry has to be an address you live at, not a place you visit." Last June, I turned 28 in my own apartment, with Maya pulling a lemon cake out of my oven, half my unit from the hospital crowded around the counter, and Patty on video call, holding the phone too close to her face. June came up with Patty's boys, 80 years old, camera strap around her neck like a medal. New camera, same shoebox. She sat me on my fire escape steps because they were the closest thing to a porch, and the flash went off and she waved the photo dry and nodded. 9, she said. Proof of Khloe. And this year, for the first time, I mailed a birthday card addressed to the Step Down program, where my sister was finishing her senior year to a girl turning 18 on the same day I turned 28. I kept it simple. Happy birthday to both of us. Love, C. I didn't know if anything would come back. Something did. One short line in handwriting I'd never once seen aimed at me, and I laughed out loud alone at my mailbox. Nobody here claps either. It's not a bridge. It might be a plank. We'll see what we build. Here's what 8 stolen birthdays taught me. Love that requires you to disappear was never love. It was rent, and you don't owe rent on a life that belongs to you. That's my story. 8 borrowed birthdays, 1 shoebox of proof, and a truth that cost me the family I wanted and handed me back the person I am. If somebody you love has their candles blown out by everyone else's noise this year, check on them. Better yet, bake the cake. If this story stayed with you, drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next.